Hi, I'm back. It's time for chapter 2. Thank you so much for joining me again today. My name is Joan, and I have been teaching English as a second language online for about 5 years. And during this time where I'm stuck inside the house, I'm quarantined, I'm a little bit bored, and I thought we could learn some English together and really do some good work on improving our English. So, this is my book club. We are reading Emma by Jane Austen. So, the English is a little bit old fashioned, but don't worry, I'll be helping you with vocabulary, helping you with difficult sentences, and telling you which words are too old to use nowadays. So, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and write them in the chat. I know a lot of you are watching this pre recorded, and that's fine. To be honest, I only did the lessons live so that I don't have to edit them. So, this is great. You can watch them later or check out chapter 1. Um, and today we'll begin chapter 2. Also, I'm sending a link right now if you want to study English with me or with another native English speaker. I definitely recommend italki. It's a great website. And this link that I posted will get you $10 off after you make a purchase. It also sends me $10 of credit for my Mandarin lessons, 因为我非常喜欢学习中文. So, yesterday in chapter 1, we met Emma Woodhouse, and she's very smart, very beautiful. You'll hear the word handsome a lot about her. Handsome today is just used for men, but in the past, it was used for women too. So she's very beautiful. She's very smart. She lives in a small village with her dad, with her father, whom she calls Papa. Seems like he's kind of boring. He's pretty old. Not very interesting. And Emma just lost her best friend. Her best friend, Miss Taylor, who was her governess or her nanny, kind of her teacher, and also the person who probably cleans the house. She lost her because Miss Taylor just got married and moved so far away. She moved a half a mile away. What is that? 1 kilometer? Like, I could walk there in 5 minutes, but okay. In that day and age, it was a pretty big deal that she moved away. So Emma just lost her friend. Miss Taylor moved away. And also, Emma feels like she is the reason that Miss Taylor got married because she introduced Miss Taylor to her new husband, Mr. Weston. Yes. So Emma is a bit of a matchmaker. She likes to introduce people to be husband and wife, hopefully. And she has promised that she will find one more person a match, Mr. Elton. So let's see what she does today. And thank you to the people who have already given a like. Please, like the video, subscribe to my channel, because really it really gives me a lot of motivation to keep working on this. All right, chapter 2. Mr. Weston was a native of Highbury and born of a respectable family, which for the last 2 or 3 generations had been rising into gentility and property. Gentility, we don't need to know this word, it's old, but this just means he's very respectable, very good family, classy. They have some money. So they're gaining money. He had received a good education, but on succeeding early in life to a small independence, had become indisposed for any of the more homely pursuits in which his brothers were engaged. Homely is like the lower educated, like playing sports maybe, or cooking. like lower educated things. So he had become indisposed, uninterested, or unable to do any of the more homely pursuits in which his brothers were engaged, and had satisfied an active, cheerful mind and social temper by entering into the militia of his county, then embodied. So he kept his mind entertained and became smarter by joining the militia, like the military for that area. Not as serious as the army, just kind of involved in the military. Captain Weston, okay, so now his name is Captain. Captain Weston was a general favorite, and when the chances of his military life had introduced him to Miss Churchill of a great Yorkshire family, and Miss Churchill fell in love with him, nobody was surprised, except her brother and his wife, who had never seen him, and who were full of pride and importance which the connection would offend. Ah, pride and importance. So he fell in love with a woman who it sounds like she's below his status, like he's very rich and important, and she's not as good. Miss Churchill, however, being of age and with the full command of her fortune, ooh, though her fortune bore no proportion to the family estate, was not to be dissuaded from the marriage. So she's rich. All right, we got it. And it took place to the infinite mortification of Mr. and Mrs. Churchill. So Mr. and Mrs. Churchill were mortified, which means they are disgusted and disappointed. Mr. and Mrs. Churchill, who threw her off with due decorum. So they said, no way, this is inappropriate. It was an unsuitable connection and did not produce much happiness. Mrs. Weston ought to have found more in it, for she had a husband whose warm heart and sweet temper made him think everything due to her in return for the great goodness of being in love with him. He was a very, very good guy. So sweet, a warm heart, and sweet temper. You'll hear this word temper a lot in this book. Temper is like our mood or emotion. So if someone has a bad temper, they get really angry. Ugh. So if you hit my car, I'll have a bad temper. But in the past, people would use it for all kinds of emotions. So in this case, he has a sweet temper. That means he doesn't get angry. He's very nice. So she should be very happy to have him. But though she had one sort of spirit, she had not the best. She had resolution enough to pursue her own will in spite of her brother, but not enough to refrain means stop, from unreasonable regrets at that brother's unreasonable anger. So her brother is very mad at her for choosing this marriage, nor from missing the luxuries, the good things, of her former home. They lived beyond their income, but still it was nothing in comparison of enscombe. I don't know this word. She did not cease to love her husband, but she wanted at once to be the wife of Captain Weston and Miss Churchill of Enscombe. Enscombe must be their family homes, the name of their family home. So she could have been Miss Churchill of Enscombe, very wealthy, very beautiful, very important. Yet she met Captain Weston, who's kind of below her, and now she's Mrs. Weston. maybe a drop in status for her. Captain Weston, who had been considered, especially by the Churchills, as making such an amazing match, was proved to have much the worst of the bargain. For when his wife died after a 3 years' marriage, he was rather a poorer man than at first, and with a child to maintain. Oh my. So he was lucky to have married her, but then 3 years later, she died. He was rather a poorer man, so less money than at first, and with a child to maintain. I wouldn't use the word maintain here for a child. Maintain is like what you do with a car or a computer. Um, but he has to support the child, he has to pay for the child. From the expense of the child, however, he was soon relieved. Ah. The boy had, with the additional softening claim of a lingering illness of his mother's, been the means of a sort of reconciliation. And Mr. and Mrs. Churchill, having no children of their own, nor any other young creature of equal kindred to care for, a young creature of equal kindred is just any young person, like any child, to care for, offered to take the whole charge of the little Frank soon after her decease. So this is her brother. Her brother took the child. Mr. and Mrs. Churchill, having no children of their own, they offered to take charge, to take care of little Frank soon after Mr. Weston's wife died. Some scruples and some reluctance the widower father may be supposed to have felt. Scruples like concerns, reluctance. No, I don't know if I should. So he felt reluctant to give away his son. But as they were overcome by other considerations, the child was given up the care and the wealth of the Churchills, up to the care and the wealth of the Churchills, and he had only his own comfort to seek and his own situation to improve as he could. So Mr. Weston, Captain Weston, no longer has a son. He gave his son to the Churchills. Ooh, I wonder if they're related to Winston Churchill. Interesting. A complete change of life became desirable. A complete change of life. He needs to change everything, move to a different place, maybe get a different job. Desirable means it's something that he wants. He desires a change. He quitted the militia. Oh, in the past you could say quitted. Today you can't. He quit the militia and engaged in trade, having brothers already established in a good way in London, which afforded him a favorable opening. Favorable, it favors him, it's a good thing for him. So basically, he got a job at his brother's company. Sounds good. It was a concern which brought just employment enough. Just enough employment. He had still a small house in Highbury, where most of his leisure days were spent. And between useful occupation and the pleasures of society, the next 18 or 20 years of his life passed cheerfully away. He had, by that time, realized an easy competence. He's capable of doing things. He's good enough. Enough to secure the purchase of a little estate adjoining Highbury, which he had always longed for. Enough to marry a woman as portionless, even as Miss Taylor, and to live according to the wishes of his own friendly and social disposition. So, enough to marry a woman as portionless, meaning Miss Taylor doesn't have any money. She doesn't have any land. Her family is not rich or important. And he wanted to marry her and to live according to the wishes of his own friendly and social disposition. So, his own friendly mood, just to be happy and have a good life. Sounds nice. It was now some time since Miss Taylor had begun to influence his schemes, but as it was not the tyrannic influence of youth on youth, tyrannic means tyrant or overwhelming, a huge influence. In this case, about young people falling in love. If you fell in love when you were 16 or 18 or 20, maybe you remember it was pretty intense. Yeah. So this was not the tyrannic influence of youth and youth. It had not shaken his determination of never settling till he could purchase Randall's. And the sale of Randall's was long looked forward to. But he had gone steadily on with these objects in view till they were accomplished. So his number one goal was to buy Randall's, which is the estate near his house. So he wants to buy more land. I'm assuming that land had a farm and cows and things like that, because land was really valuable. So he worked hard for this goal and he achieved it. He had made his fortune, bought his house, and obtained his wife, and was beginning a new period of existence with every probability, every chance of greater happiness than in any yet passed through. He had never been an unhappy man. His own temper, his own mood, had secured him from that. So he was never unhappy. He's always okay. His own temper had secured him from that, even in his first marriage. But his second must show him how delightful a well-judging and truly amiable woman could be. He's really hoping his second marriage will be great. Will show him how delight, yay, good. A well-judging, I think here well-judging means she is very smart. She makes good decisions. And truly amiable. Amiable is a word that means pleasant, nice. We don't use this word very much today. And must give him the pleasantest proof of its being a great deal better to choose than to be chosen, to excite gratitude than to feel it. So in this case, he wants to show Miss Taylor that he is choosing her and to make her feel grateful to him. He wants to make her happy. He had only himself to please in his choice. His fortune was his own, for as to Frank, it was more than being tacitly brought up as his uncle's heir. It became so avowed an adoption as to have him assume the name of Churchill on coming of age. Coming of age means to turn into an adult. Today, that would mean 18. I'm not sure what age it would be back then. So this paragraph is talking about Mr. Weston only has to take care of himself. His money belongs to him. He doesn't have a dad or a brother trying to get the money. And his son is no longer his son. His son has been adopted by the other family, by the Churchills. Oops. It was most unlikely, therefore, that he should ever want his father's assistance. His father had no apprehension of it. The aunt was a capricious woman. Capricious is like very smart, and kind of controlling. Like, do this, do that. So his aunt was a capricious woman and governed her husband entirely. She was the boss. But it was not in Mr. Weston's nature to imagine that any caprice could be strong enough to affect one so dear, and as he believed, so deservedly dear. So that means that his son is just her son now. He saw his son every year in London and was proud of him, and his fond report of him as a very fine young man had made Highbury feel a sort of pride in him too. He was looked on as sufficiently belonging to the place to make his merits and prospects a kind of common concern. Okay. So his merits and prospects, like what he's doing with his life, his successes and his hopes and failures. And it's kind of a common concern for the village. I can relate to this a lot. I think I'm from a small village. There's only about 400 people. So when people talk to my mom, they're always asking about me. Everybody cares about where I ended up. It's kind of a common concern, common interest. Mr. Frank Churchill was one of the boasts of Highbury, and a lively curiosity to see him prevailed. So people wanted to see him. Though the compliment was so little returned that he had never been there in his life. His coming to visit his father had been often talked of, but never achieved. Okay, so he's like a celebrity, but he's never been there? Interesting. Now, upon his father's marriage, it was very generally proposed as a most proper attention that the visit should take place. So people think he should come and visit his dad to meet his dad's new wife. Makes sense. Now remember, London is 16 miles away. So it's like 30 kilometers. Like, I mean, it's too far to walk, but it's not that far. I'm guessing on horses it would take like a day, maybe. Interesting. There was not a dissentient voice on the subject. Dissentient, don't learn this word. It means just people disagreeing with it. Everyone said he should come. No one said no. Either when Mrs. Perry drank tea with Mrs. and Miss Bates, or when Mrs. and Miss Bates returned the visit. Now was the time for Mr. Frank Churchill to come among them, and the hope strengthened when it was understood that he had written to his new mother on the occasion. So he wrote a letter to Miss Taylor. For a few days, every morning visit in Highbury included some mention of the handsome letter Mrs. Weston had received. So every morning people are talking about him writing a letter to his stepmom. Okay. I guess that's what life was like before Facebook. I suppose you have heard of the handsome letter Mr. Frank Churchill has written to Mrs. Weston? I understand it was a very handsome letter indeed. Mr. Woodhouse told me of it. Mr. Woodhouse saw the letter, and he says he never saw such a handsome letter in his life. Okay, letters are really beautiful back then. Such a handsome letter. You know, my mom wrote me a handsome letter the other day. It's very beautiful. She painted on it. I would call this a very beautiful letter. Very handsome. Oh, such a handsome letter indeed. It was indeed a highly prized letter. Mrs. Weston had, of course, formed a very favorable idea of the young man, and such a pleasing attention was an irresistible proof of his great and good sense. So she had a good idea about her new stepson person. And this letter was proof that he is very polite and good. Seems very easy to impress people back then. Um, Irresistible proof of his good sense, and a most welcome addition to every source and every expression of congratulation which her marriage had already secured. She felt herself a most fortunate woman, and she had lived long enough to know how fortunate she might well be thought. So she was very lucky. She felt like she had gained a lot. Um, where the only regret was for a partial separation from friends whose friendship for her had never cooled and who could ill bear to part with her. I wonder what friends she's worried about separating from. Hmm, perhaps it's Emma? She knew that at times she must be missed and could not think, without pain, of Emma's losing a single pleasure or suffering in hours and you. I don't know this word. I think it means pain. So she doesn't want Emma to suffer, to lose a single pleasure or suffer an hour's pain from the want of her companionableness. Oof, this is not a real word. Companionableness. What she's saying is she doesn't want Emma to miss her. She doesn't want Emma to be sad. But dear Emma was of no feeble, no weak character. She was more equal to her situation than most girls would have been, and had sense and energy and spirits that might be hoped would bear her well and happily through its little difficulties and privations. So, it's another word I don't know. Privations. Ah. So Emma is of no feeble character. Feeble is weak. Oh, I'm so feeble. Her character is strong and she is smart and energetic. So she will be okay. And then there was such comfort in the very easy distance of Randall's from Hartfield. So convenient for even solitary female walking. Solitary, alone, female walking. Okay. So it's even convenient for a woman walking alone. Hey, I don't even know if I can do that in my city. So that's pretty good. And in Mr. Weston's disposition and circumstances, his mood and his money, which would make the approaching season no hindrance to their spending half the evenings in the week together. So Emma and Mrs. Weston can spend half the evenings in the week together. Oh, good. Her situation was altogether the subject of hours of gratitude to Mrs. Weston, and of moments only of regret, and her more than satisfaction, her cheerful enjoyment was so just and so apparent that Emma, well as she knew her father, was sometimes taken by surprise at his being still able to Poor Miss Taylor, when they left her at Randall's, in the center of every domestic comfort, or saw her go away in the evening, attended by her pleasant husband to a carriage of her own. Ooh, that was a long sentence. Okay, let's break it down. So, her situation, Emma's situation, is to help Mrs. Weston, Miss Taylor, formerly Miss Taylor, help her be really happy. And so Emma was surprised that her father was pitying her. That her father said, "Poor Miss Taylor." Well, Miss Taylor is doing pretty good. She kind of won the lottery in husbands. We don't need to pity her. Oops, turn the page. But never did she go without Mr. Woodhouse's giving her a gentle sigh and saying, "Ah, poor Miss Taylor. She would be very glad to stay." There was no recovering Miss Taylor, nor much likelihood of ceasing to pity her. So they can't get her back, and they can't stop missing her. But a few weeks brought some alleviation to Mr. Woodhouse, some relief. It alleviated his problems. The compliments of his neighbors were over. He was no longer teased by being wished joy of so sorrowful an event. And the wedding cake, which had been a great distress to him, was all eat up. Okay. So people have stopped congratulating him. He didn't want to be congratulated because he misses Miss Taylor. And now that people have stopped congratulating him, people have stopped talking about it, and he has stopped eating cake, everything will be better now. His own stomach could bear nothing rich, and he could never believe other people to be different from himself. What was unwholesome to him, he regarded as unfit for anybody, and he had therefore earnestly tried to dissuade them from having any wedding cake at all. And when that proved vain, as earnestly tried to prevent anybody's eating it. What a bummer. He hates cake because it hurts his stomach. Okay. So maybe he has like diabetes or irritable bowel syndrome, but he feels sick from cake, so he thinks nobody should eat cake. I know some men like that. Don't worry about it. He had been at the pains of consulting Mr. Perry, the apothecary, on the subject. Apothecary is like a doctor, but old-timey doctor. A few hundred years ago, they kind of make mixtures to help people. So he had been at the pains of consulting Mr. Perry, the apothecary. Mr. Perry, the apothecary. That sounds good. On the subject. Mr. Perry was an intelligent, gentlemanlike man whose frequent visits were one of the comforts of Mr. Woodhouse's life. And upon being applied to, he could not but acknowledge that wedding cake might certainly disagree with many. Okay. He could not but acknowledge, though it seemed rather against the bias of inclination, that wedding cake might certainly disagree with many. Acknowledge means to agree with or simply recognize. Like, I acknowledge that coronavirus is happening. I don't promote it. I'm not excited about it. So this doctor, this apothecary, was willing to agree that wedding cake is bad for most people, but he wasn't strictly opposed to it. He didn't force people to not have it. Perhaps with most people, unless taken moderately. So people shouldn't eat too much cake. Oh my God. One wedding cake is making all these people sick. Ah, old times were hard, huh? With such an opinion and confirmation of his own, Mr. Woodhouse hoped to influence every visitor of the newly married pair. But the cake was still eaten, and there was no rest for his benevolent nerves till it was all gone. This cake made him sick. He was trying to stop everyone from eating it. But I imagine a wedding cake must have been very beautiful, very delicious. So imagine if you had a giant cake in your house that everyone wanted to eat, but you kept telling them, no, don't eat it, don't eat it. And they still ate it anyway. That would probably be pretty stressful. I baked some muffins this morning, so that's my life in the kitchen right now. Don't eat too many muffins. Joan, don't eat all the muffins. I ate a lot of them. I didn't eat them all. With such an opinion. Sorry. Okay, so, and there was no rest for his benevolent nerves, his difficult nerves, his anxiety, till it was all gone. Okay, I don't have to talk about this cake anymore. Good. There was a strange rumor in Highbury of all the little Perrys being seen with a slice of Mrs. Weston's wedding cake in their hands, but Mr. Woodhouse would never believe it. All the little Perrys. Remember, Mr. Perry is the apothecary? So all of the little kids and his wife, maybe, or I don't know. Sounds like Mr. Perry brought home a slice of wedding cake to his whole family after telling Mr. Woodhouse that cake is bad. Doesn't matter, cake is delicious. But Mr. Woodhouse would never believe it. Great. That's the end of chapter 2. Oh my gosh, so much faster than chapter 1. A lot of great vocabulary in here, a lot of long sentences. English literature has very long sentences and long paragraphs, but stick with it. I'm trying to break it down into easy to understand chunks so that you can improve your English, improve your vocabulary, and just enjoy reading a book with me so that we don't go crazy while we're stuck in the house. So thanks for joining me today. I'll be live tomorrow at about the same time, but definitely you can just watch it in the replays. And please help me out. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. And if you have any friends who would be interested in joining the book club, then send them chapter 1 and we'll see them tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.